All right, Chatbot builders, we've got ourselves an important guest here. This is actually the first interview that's been hosted on this channel. We've got VoiceFlow's CEO, Braden Ream. And just like VoiceFlow was the first product that I kind of jumped in and started building agents on, it's quite fitting to have you on as the first guest, Braden. So I appreciate the time on jumping in here. And thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. Excited to chat and sure we'll cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, and just to give people maybe a little bit of backstory as to why this conversation is happening. So we linked up last week and kind of talked, the landscape of agent builders and chatbots. And as you can imagine, I had a lot of things to say, and I just started firing. And you said, "Hey, Connor, are you recording this? You want to release snippets out to your YouTube channel?" So unfortunately, I wasn't set up for that at that time. But now, let's have a real interview and sit down and see if we can, kind of go through some of these talking points, which I think the builders across the board will find value in for sure.
Totally. Yeah, and we'll try to recreate some of the magic of the conversation we had last week and all that because I don't have any scripted answers or anything like that, but I've certainly got thoughts on a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about.
Sounds good. Let's kind of dive in here. So when it comes to, chatbot builders or agent builders, however you want to label it, there's a wide range of skill sets, right? You've got the full stack devs that are kind of looking for a framework to accelerate their efforts, or, the no code, low code builders that are maybe, dipping their toes into AI and automations for the first time. So like, how do you answer the question, who is VoiceFlow built for?
Yeah. We focus on product teams. And so the way we define a product team is when um, you have someone who's really focused on the user experience. Often it's like a product owner or a designer. And then the customers who get the most value from VoiceFlow typically have some sort of technical resource, or they have access to a tool that can help them do a little bit of custom code. But that's our sweet spot because if you've got like where VoiceFlow is the best, and this is where we focus for the kind of like past like almost 5 years now, is on like the ability to finally control the customer experience. Like really like we kind of talk about it as a design-led approach, right? Like we view ourselves almost like the Figma for conversational AI. Like how do we provide like a really sleek, collaborative user experience to build incredible AI agents. And so if you have someone who's really focused on the design and you have someone who's able to um, write a little bit of code in places or, at least have access to a technical resource. That's where like the absolute sweet spot is. But we also have a lot of folks who maybe they don't use all the customization features that VoiceFlow has available, which is totally fine. And that's for them we're a pure low code tool. So it's like, think of us as like low code is kind of like the level one. And we definitely care about these folks a lot. Like that's our kind of core like user experience designer. But then where you get the most value is when you have a team and it's a designer and a developer. That's like the sweet spot.
That that makes sense, and it's difficult to try to build a product to make everybody across that spectrum like really happy. Like, how do we release this feature? Whether it's an integration or something direct, it's really difficult to kind of nail that sweet spot. But I think VoiceFlow, kind of has this framework that's team driven and product driven. There's enough for everybody to kind of get interested in and kind of build on top of that value. I do have
Yeah.
a question, like the
Yeah.
low code, and this is something that I've kind of been like
Yeah.
thinking on more. Is the word like no code, low code? Are we going to get rid of it here shortly? Because is there even such thing as no code anymore? Because, Claude models and GPT have gotten, pretty good at, just handling whether it's basic JavaScript or HTML and CSS. It's almost like we've elevated everybody into this low code status, even if you have zero experience coding yourself.
Yeah. Um, so it's funny you brought that up. Like when we started the company, we were describing ourselves entirely as like a no code, low code tool. Um, and I think that the challenge is then you have like kind of a one size fits all bot, like if there's no customization whatsoever. Um, and you also have to ask yourself, so, I know a lot of the people who are watching this are probably like agency owners. If there's no customization whatsoever, you might bring the user experience design side, but like a lot of the SMBs could just do it themselves if it's that easy, right? And so like actually having a little bit of code to get like that final 20%, that customization to your business is really important. So the reason I brought up like when we started the business is we actually named VoiceFlow off of Webflow. We were huge fans of Webflow in 2018, and it was a really simple business pitch. It was going to be voice apps, like what Webflow did for websites, VoiceFlow will do for voice apps, right? We were kind of lazy, like almost like lazy in naming the company in that sense. And Webflow initially started as a big low code tool, no code tool. Now you see they don't even bring it up because I think there's been this larger trend to a lot of these tools can just write code for you now. So to some degree, everything's low code, no code. But also, I think it infers almost like too much simplicity. When if you're trying to be like I would argue like Wix might describe themselves as low code, but if you're trying to be like the best, sometimes there's things that a visual interface actually just does better. So conversation orchestration is a great example of like sometimes having a node graph of how the business logic should be orchestrated is actually more useful than just writing if statements in code, right? And so that actually might be an example where it's not like no code because you can't code, it's no code because that's the better tool. And then there are times where it's like code is actually the better tool than the visual interface to do another particular thing, right? And so I think everything's kind of low code now. And I think it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, it's just utilizing the strengths of each individual interface, like whether that be coding or like more of a visual interface.
Yeah, no, and that's something that I've kind of experienced even building out these agents for companies is having that visual representation. I think it kind of helps the non-technical teams kind of get an idea of what's going on because they can't, if it was a complete custom chatbot or agent built from, Node and PHP and Python and stuff like that, the non-technical teams have absolutely no idea what's going on. And having
Like,
something of a visual representation, even if it's a block of code or a JavaScript block, at least they can compartmentalize kind of what's going on from an organizational standpoint because we are, butting up against this, new technology with AI and LLMs and what's going on in this black box. And anytime that you can kind of reduce that fear by kind of structuring things, and a big part of what we're doing more as like consultants and builders is educating the clients on what's going around. So having these visual representations of whether it's a conversation or what's going on is definitely super helpful for these products, which is the reason that I've kind of planted my flag here in this builder space, because I think it offers kind of a lot out of the box that's useful in these conversations.
and I think this market is so big that there's going to be like in every product category, there's kind of a spectrum of like easiest to use and like most powerful. And so like if we take websites, because that's a well-known example, Wix card's probably the easiest. Like it is dead simple, but it doesn't really have that much customization. Then you've probably got Wix, then maybe you have like Weebly, and then maybe you go up a step further, maybe it's WordPress, and eventually you get to like Webflow, right? And the Framer is somewhere in there too. And they all exist on this spectrum of like what level of trade-offs are you going to make? Because every time you add features, you're also adding complexity. Now, great product design can minimize that trade-off, but you are adding complexity, right? Like VoiceFlow would be, imagine how simple VoiceFlow would be if it was just a knowledge base. You upload, it'd be like chat based or something, right? Like you upload a document and you start chatting with it, and that's it. You upload your widget. But instead, we have this like big complex workflow builder and like custom functions and all this kind of stuff, and it adds complexity. And so we've made the decision of we're going to be the most powerful. Like that's the spectrum that we want to play on. And I think again, because the market's so big, there isn't going to be a one size fits all, because there are going to be some customers who are like, I actually don't need the level of features that VoiceFlow has. It's just too much, right? All I need is this. Or you have some customers say, hey, actually, I need more than what VoiceFlow can give me. I have to go to custom code or something, right? And I think as tool builders, it's a really dangerous statement to say we're like the one size fits all, or like this is like the platform for everyone for everything, because it's just not true. Like we would rather a customer, if they come to us and they give us their needs and it's not what we fill, we'll try to not push them, but like guide them elsewhere, right? Because at the end of the day, the market's so big, everyone will be successful if they just focus on what they want to be good at.
No, absolutely. And, new tools are going to, pop up every day. I'm starting to get emails just because I have this channel. Hey, Connor, can you look at this? Love to get your, feedback and all that stuff. And, it's difficult from a builder perspective because there's all these, shiny potentially features that we could go and, test out and stuff like that. But if I just spent all day in builder land, there's so many of them out there that I wouldn't be servicing clients. I wouldn't be making any
Totally.
money, right? Because I could literally just make this channel almost like a research type deal. And is so much out there, to your point, and that's okay. This environment is large enough. There's enough pieces of the pie that we're going to kind of get a full spectrum of businesses coming in. And I want to tie into another question here.
Totally.
Meta just released their quarterly announcement, and Zuckerberg put out this kind of long post, and it was a really long post that was mostly about Facebook earnings and the algorithm and stuff like that. There
Yeah.
was 4 sentences in here that, boy, as a chatbot builder and agent builder, got my attention, right? Which was, Meta is in alpha stages, testing with small businesses, building out these kind of AI agent functionalities inside of the Meta suite between Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. So I know a lot of the requests right now were, let me build this in VoiceFlow and then tie it into the WhatsApp, or that's a very, very common requested integration feature, right?
Totally.
Because they have such a large user base on their platforms. So we've got OpenAI that's released the Assistance API. So the big tech boys that they're coming to town, I guess is the way to phrase that. And I'm curious, Braden, from your perspective, what is your kind of reaction, at seeing some of these larger companies kind of get in the game to take their slice of the pie? Because, a builder that comes out, has to kind of go through the same steps that you did, right? From a marketing from scratch, from everything from scratch. Whereas, these big tech companies have a very large advantage. So their slice of the pie that they might take might be felt or have kind of a shockwave ripple effect that is, potentially unintended. So I'm just kind of
Totally.
curious, as you see these announcements come through, how you feel about the product.
Totally. First of all, I think it's exciting anytime new tools come out. And I have, Meta aside, I have basically kind of the same thinking when it comes to all of like what I would describe as like the foundational infrastructure technologies. When you're playing with really big numbers, like, how like hundreds of millions of users in the case of ChatGPT, hundreds of millions of businesses in the case of Meta, I think the business strategy for them is to always go on the easy side of the spectrum. Like I've never seen it where, right out of the gates, they come up with like the most advanced builder you've ever seen, because their customers are like hundreds of millions of SMBs who just need like the easy access, right? So I don't think it'll be like a node graph type builder, which is a little bit more advanced. It'll probably looks very similar to something like what we saw with GPTs, right? A little bit more simple, a little bit more form fieldy. And I think that's totally fine, because the kind of the bet that we're making at VoiceFlow is that the reason we focus on the power side of the spectrum is that the bottom of like the easiest will continue to have to move up, because I think the platform providers themselves are going to add like these really simple capabilities. And I think there are definitely some customers where they might use VoiceFlow today for really simple like Instagram automation, and they might switch to the native Meta tool, and that's totally fine, because at the end of the day, we're trying to build for like that product team. Like you want to provide a really advanced customer experience. You want to have a lot of features, integrations, all these types of things. And so that's what we're focused on. So it's funny. I saw like a newsletter subject line today. I was like, "Is ManyChat dead?" And ManyChat's kind of like a like similar to VoiceFlow in that, but they focus exclusively on like the Meta platforms, and I think they've built like a great suite there, because it's not just the builder; it's got a whole bunch of different things. And it's no, I think the simpler you are, the more at risk you are. But I think you kind of knew that. Now you could always make the argument like you can even try to win on UX versus Meta. You could even try to be even simpler, right? They're just going to have the distribution, and that's a very different game. But I think if you're focusing on like power and like really enabling customers to build really advanced things, I think that's going to continue to move up at the same time as kind of the floor moves up. So basically, like if you're competing on the ceiling, I think that's fine, because the floor is going to keep moving up.
Yep. No, I think you make a lot of great points, and I'm in alignment with a lot of what you said, and something that it, it it's definitely like, ooh, like as a chatbot builder, I'm building all of these things. Is that going to be useful to the market here in a few months if
Yeah.
something like the big boy Meta comes out that it's just here, click, form attach type deal. On the surface, it's like, ooh, maybe I'm not in the right place here, or maybe I'm going to become commoditized here really
Yeah.
shortly. But the other end of that spectrum that kind of gets me excited is the adoption curve is about to shoot through the roof then, right?
Yep.
Because then you're going to have all of the small businesses, because it's, relatively easy to get in and use this stuff, start
Totally.
to get used to agent functionality. And I've kind of been, in this early phase, just trying to drive value with everybody that I speak to, all these conversations that I have. I'm less concerned about the chatbot agent that I build right now for X amount of dollars. I want you to continue to think about things as you integrate these and want to automate more parts of your business or introduce new agents and have additional functionality. And I want to be the one that you think of first when that happens. So if the small businesses
Totally.
come through and kind of get this, let's just call it a cookie cutter agent experience from a platform like Meta, it's going to do maybe one or two things out of the box. But then for that plus one layer, for that added functionality, you're probably going to, need to move into a different tool. And one of probably the advantages that a product like VoiceFlow has is you could probably be a little bit more nimble and act a little bit quicker than the larger platforms that they're like the cruise ship or the battle cruiser in the ocean, right? They can't turn very quickly, but once they get moving, that they've got a full kind of head of steam here. So as long as you're
Totally.
kind of always pushing that forefront and the tip of the spear, businesses are going to require specific functionality for themselves always. And
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the main values that we have as agent builders right now is you don't need to wait for a SaaS platform that's, this is for, dental practices, or this is for, you don't have to wait for the SaaS product to be built, which reminds you, still puts you in a box because you have to live in that SaaS box and those feature sets that, are only have, five or six things going on. As custom agent builders, we have the entire ocean, so to say, to play with.
Totally. Yeah, I think you make a great point. And it coincides with what we see at VoiceFlow around the greater, like the top of funnel of like really basic like if every single SMB out there had a chatbot and it was really, really basic, they built it with a Meta tool or a GPT or whatever, 10% of those are going to say, I actually want something a little bit more, right? And it just grows the wider top of funnel. Because at the
Yep.
end of the day, like people are going to move down that funnel. And it's funny, we've actually seen this with VoiceFlow in terms of people start out with really simple tools. And then it's so often people then find VoiceFlow when they were just looking for something that had a little bit more than the tool that they started on, right? And so we actually see a very similar adoption curve at VoiceFlow. Okay, so here's something I didn't think about. I haven't really talked about it publicly. Is I think that there is like a layer of promotion for tools where we kind of live in like this hype cycle shiny object syndrome where it's like the voice flow killer, and then it's like the this killer, the ChatGPT killer, and then I feel like sometimes tools get promoted because there's people who have built their following by sharing new tools, but then you can't keep sharing the same tool every single week, and so you need to come out with something new, right? And so there's definitely shiny object syndrome. You see it a lot on Twitter, and LinkedIn and YouTube and stuff. And it's funny because a lot of these people who do this, and it's I'm not universally speaking. Sorry, I'm speaking just universally, not against any one particular person. I noticed like they'll bring up things that we don't even do. They're like, "Oh, VoiceFlow's like it's native WhatsApp integration." I'm like, "We don't have a native WhatsApp integration," but
Right.
like they just like did a quick Google search. They've never actually used any of the tools. They're just pushing these tool lists, right? Because it's like a way to build a following and stuff.
Yep.
And I think it's natural, but I also think it can be super distracting for people in this space too. I actually really appreciate when I call them like, kind of like influencers in the space, like we'll spend a couple weeks with a tool, right? And like, they're not just doing like lists of here's 15 different
Right.
tools. I'm gonna show a tutorial series on this tool, and then maybe the next month I'll do this tool, and then that way you can actually get a bit of a feel, right? Because yeah, there's very much a shiny object syndrome, and it can be distracting.
Yeah, definitely. And as I kind of bounce around, not that I like to move around in tools a lot because it's a lift, right? It's a time requirement. So for me to actually put out a video in a builder, I want to make sure that I understand what's going on, because in order for me to educate, chatbot builders or people in the space that are building agents, like I I don't, it's not that valuable for me to just click around and based on what the copy is on the
Yeah.
landing page and, what's on the pricing page to make any kind of, reasonable assumption on what's going on in the full features. And the other thing too is with these agents, you want to push them live,
Yep.
right? Like you want to get them out there. You want people to start hitting them. And that's, it's not something that can be done quickly in order for you to gain value. And that's really the case with any of these building platforms. I'm sure you see it a lot in the Discord with VoiceFlow, Braden, is people that come in that are trying to build their first bot, and they get frustrated with something or they're trying to do something, and then they just leave. They're like, I can't do this. This is too much. VoiceFlow sucks. Like this. I'm sure that is unfortunate, but it's also just kind of part of the game, as
Totally.
this, education is almost kind of the main component of the product in order to get the user base going.
Yeah, and if I was choosing a tool today, I'd say having like a main and a backup is probably a good idea. And I would say like we see a lot of users where they might say they're choosing on a very particular feature. Voiceflow hasn't launched GPT-4 Mini yet. We have now, but like
Right.
I can't use this platform. And I think that, at any one moment, it might feel like the platforms are similar, but our feature sets are actually pretty different. Like the kind of the main functionality is going to overlap a lot, but there's going to be a lot of features where like X will have, maybe more models, Y will have maybe this capability, Z will have this capability. And I think what really matters is not any one particular feature, but try to think about what does this tool focus on? Because then you can kind of put yourself in the eyes of the builder and think through their roadmap. How does this company think? And do I align with that thinking, right? Like what are they focused on? And am I focused on that similar thing? Because if so, they might have a feature gap for a month or something, but then they'll catch up and continue to add the things that you want. And so I think knowing, on that like easy to hard spectrum we talked about, maybe on the channels they focus on, like, listen to their CEOs or founders, whoever it is, like talk. And I think you'll get a pretty good feeling for like, where's this platform going to go? Because at any one moment, some platform is going to have some shiny new feature that another platform doesn't have. And it's not about any one feature. It's about the overall theme features they're adding. And does that align with what you're looking for?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think on our call last week, you even coined it feature gap, right? Sometimes these feature gaps, it's, oh, everybody's got to drop what they're doing and go to the new tool because of this feature gap.
Yeah.
And I've certainly, a feature will release and I will go do some exploration, but it's a little bit different than to just say, I'm going to drop everything that I'm doing and stop building in this one particular tool, or ignore all of the things that are coming out on the roadmap for this particular tool just because there's a feature gap, because the products are going to continue to evolve and change and get stronger. And it's okay that the tools have their own particular uses for different cases. That's part of our job as builders and agents. And it doesn't mean that VoiceFlow isn't building enough or doesn't have enough, or they're not including enough, things on their roadmap. Like you very much have, this is our goal. This is where we're standing. This is our, particular user base that we're looking to build towards. And that's it. We're going to have people that jump on the ship and jump off the ship at all times. And we just kind of have to continue to steer through, these waters and not hit any icebergs. I'll give you like an example.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I particularly like VoiceFlow is because of the professional branding that you have, right? You have enterprise companies
Right.
that are using VoiceFlow right now. So if I am in a discovery call with a company and I'm talking to a CTO type or somebody that's technical, okay, the particular builder that I'm going to use, they're going to go do research, right? Because I have to not just sell my services as a builder and my skills, I also have to sell VoiceFlow as a good idea for this company to integrate into their particular tech stack.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I'm promoting like a company that if they go and do some research on, oh, okay, this company is venture back funded. It's, it's got a laundry list of things. There's enterprise companies already working for it. And what that does is, okay, it reduces the risk from their end that this is just, some tool that a few guys put together in a weekend, right? Even if,
Totally.
there's a feature set that's, particularly useful. It's a more looking at the entire kind of piece of the pie and what you have to do as builders. So it's not just features on the surface that I think that people need to kind of be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Companies compete on so many different things that aren't just product. Like, what I mean by that is you're competing on the ability to raise capital. You're competing on your branding. You're competing on your ability to actually run a company as well. Because if you can run a company effectively, then eventually that's going to lead to more and more feature gaps because you're not able to get things done. Yeah, it's fun. I talk with our exec team a lot about this, and that at any one moment you may be behind or ahead on any one particular category, and you have to try to push on them all. But like you compete in so many different ways, right? And I think business is really kind of nuanced that way. So yeah, I totally agree.
Let's double down on the kind of venture backed thing. So it's August right now, and we're having this interview. You're up here on your 1 year anniversary of your $15 million funding round that you did last August. That was backed by OpenView, and looking at their portfolio, the obvious company that jumps out to me is Calendly, which last time I checked is worth about 3 billion. So you've got some skilled people in your corner, Braden. I'm curious from, a company perspective, how much does this, VC money kind of dictate what happens on a day-to-day basis or in your roadmap? Like how does that integrate?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So we've raised about 35 million in total. So we did actually it might be a little bit closer to 40 now. But yeah, because we did the $15 million round last year, and honestly, that was more of a top up. We didn't necessarily need the cash, but OpenView, they invest in a lot of like product-led growth companies like Calendly, and they were super excited. We've raised funding from Google and Amazon as well. They're both backers. Craft Ventures. We've got a lot of great folks around the table. So I think venture capital can be both really helpful and really harmful, and it totally depends on how much you let it influence your roadmap. So venture capitalists want you to grow as fast as humanly possible, right? And I think what that can mean is, hey, we're going to go sign really big contracts with really big enterprises. We're going to dictate our entire roadmap. At VoiceFlow, no one customer is more than 5% of revenue. I can safely announce that.
Yeah.
At a lot of conversational AI companies, that is not the case. It is 50% or 20%.
I wouldn't have guessed that, honestly. That's pretty surprising to hear. I would have guessed that you had a few of the big boys that have made up a larger chunk there. So that's pretty good, I think, from a diversification standpoint.
Yeah, and that's very purposeful. So we don't do professional services, and that means our contract sizes are going to be much smaller than companies where they say, hey, not only are we going to provide you the software platform, but we're also going to build it for you, right? Our whole approach as a company is around community as a core. And so we would rather app partners be able to fill any like immediate gaps that we have. We would rather service partners and experts be able to fill professional services gaps because we want to focus on the software platform. Like our engineering team is more than the majority of the company
Right.
because like we don't have like a ton of salespeople and a ton of marketers. Like we're not just trying to like take down these huge contracts. And so it's very much a company decision. Now, that can be really difficult if a VC is crawling down your neck to make you try to grow. And so what it requires, and this is going back to that, like you compete on multiple different areas conversation. I think we've gotten pretty good at having conversations with our backers on what are we trying to build? Like, what's the long-term play, right? Like, what's the biggest company in 5 years? Not just how do we get to the next revenue target in 1 year. And we believe that the biggest company comes from building a platform with a great community on top of it, and not just having a couple of enterprise customers, dictate the next, the next year's roadmap. And so thankfully our backers, they've backed WordPress, Slack, Canva, like they're actually very familiar with this type of approach. Notion as well sits on our board. The person who did the seed round of Notion, so they're very, very familiar with this kind of approach, and so they've been really comfortable. But I think for a lot of companies, it can skew them the other way. And then the really toxic cycle that we've seen in our industry, and so it's kind of like pre-ChatGPT. A lot of folks might not be familiar with some of the companies I would reference, but like, is you land a really big customer, it's 50% of your revenue, and you're going to build it for them. Well, now that you're building it for them, you don't need to focus on the UX of the tool. The user experience doesn't have to be good. The toolkit can actually kind of like, to some extent, take a back seat.
Sure.
Now, we actually compete with some companies who do their implementations with VoiceFlow because their own tooling has gotten so bad or all over the place, whatever you want to call it. It's become like a bit of a Frankenstein approach where we will be in a deal and we know we're competing with ourselves because we're competing with that team that is selling a solution, and they're ultimately their professional services team is doing implementations with VoiceFlow.
That's interesting.
But it's funny though, it teaches you a little bit about, there's like multiple different types of sales. If you're selling a business solution, does the customer really care if you're using an underlying competitive platform? If I just want to solve the thing and you're telling me that X is the price to solve the thing, who cares, right? And so you end up having a kind of funny realization of like, they're selling solutions and they're selling platforms. If I'm selling you a platform, I'm selling you a toolkit to go do it yourself. I'm selling you a fishing rod. Some companies just want to buy the fish, right?
It's the same thing for us as chatbot builders, which you're seeing a lot of white label stuff kind of bump up, which is not only am I building on this platform, but I'm doing everything for you. I'm installing it for you. I'm hosting it for you. I'm managing everything for you. So that's kind of interesting from VoiceFlow's side, as your sales team is kind of competing with people that are also white labeling your own services as this productized solution here. But at the end of the day, depending on the business and what their skill set is, what level they want to get involved, how much control, it goes back to the full spectrum. That there's enough in here for everybody to kind of carve out their own niche and play their own game. There's no playbook here. Everybody is kind of finding their own way and getting kind of in here. It's really interesting to watch it all emerge.
Yeah, no, I think this is why VoiceFlow, at the very beginning of the call, you asked, who do we focus on? We focus on product teams because product teams want to build it themselves, right?
That makes sense.
If we focus on customer support teams or CX teams or marketing teams, they might just want the fish because they don't have a technical resource on their team. They have no desire. They've already got 18 other things going on. They're like, I'm going to give you $100,000 and you're just going to do it all for me, right? Versus at VoiceFlow, it's like we might be half the price, but you got to do it yourself, right? So you have to have that resource.
What are the things that some of the enterprise teams and some of the larger clients that you have, what is the difference between, say, an agent that they build compared to something that I might build for, let's call it a small business or something like that? Is it additional complexity? Is it more code? Is it security? Like what are those builds look like that you think would be different?
Yeah, I mean security for sure, but that doesn't really impact like the agents, right? That's more so like we're ISO compliant, we're SOC 2 compliant, GDPR, like all that kind of stuff. Actually, I will say there's a ton of complexity in getting enterprise customers on your cloud infrastructure side. Like we have at any one point, we may have 30 plus clouds active because customers have their own clouds. For some customers where they want to reduce latency, they might need a cloud in a very particular region deployed in the world. Like there's a lot of complexity to managing tons of cloud environments. But in terms of the actual builds, it's mostly scale. And this is where, again, VoiceFlow's focus is if we were to really narrow our focus, it is product teams that are building very complex agents where they want that fine-tuned control over the customer experience, and they want to do it at scale. And so this is why you've seen a lot of our releases recently have been focused on the content management system.
CMS focus. Yep.
Yeah, all the CMS stuff. And the reason for that is because of scale. If you only have one workflow or 10 documents in your knowledge base, the CMS isn't really going to be that helpful. But with enterprise customers, I'm not kidding, we see thousands of intents, millions of utterances.
Wow.
We have to do a ton of like optimization of the canvas so they can handle hundreds and hundreds of nodes.
Sure.
Like you've got
and that's things that builders probably wouldn't even think of, with their first release of the products, right? What happens when this gets taken to the nth degree?
Totally.
I broke the designer because it can't handle that many variables inside. That's a really interesting perspective that I wouldn't have even really thought of, at first glance.
Well, this is so. I appreciate this longer form podcast because I get to talk with the nuance of it. Because often we have to think, but like, how do we very succinctly how do we make VoiceFlow's value clear? VoiceFlow is like the lowest total cost of ownership over time, and that sounds like a whole bunch of like mumbo jumbo. But really, what it is when you have multiple agents, multiple use cases, and you need to be able to change a message for a customer, and it needs to propagate that message change across 15 different nodes and like multiple agents and all that kind of stuff. Like that's where having centralized content is so key. And that's where our head just keeps thinking scale. Because at the end of the day, like it's not just about the first launch of an agent, it's about being able to iterate on it the 40th time, right? And so a real world example of this is going to be, if you're just doing a graphic design once for an SMB, you could either use Canva or you could use Figma. Figma is probably like, it's too much. It actually might be too slow. It's got reusable components and libraries and all these things. But Figma suddenly, when you're trying to do it at scale across use cases, across teams, suddenly Figma is the only way you can do it, right? So we're very much trying to be like that Figma style approach where a lot of the features of, again, reusable component libraries in VoiceFlow, content management, templates. Eventually, we're going to have like team libraries as well. That's going to be coming. That's all this stuff because you're trying to do this. You're trying to build great bots, and you're trying to do a lot of them.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And when you're having these conversations with these, enterprise teams, whether it's from the sales side or the product side itself, who from the organization is usually involved in these discussions? Because I can imagine, these enterprise companies, they have huge employee counts and teams that are fractured into different, and maybe as a kind of plus one to this question, as VoiceFlow builds out more CMS style functionality, who do you anticipate from organizations are going to be kind of in charge of these agents and agent management? Do you think that there'll be new positions or maybe some existing ones just absorb a little bit of this kind of responsibility?
Yeah, so we mostly engage with product teams. And I can't name the name of the customer, but it's a very large financial services customer. And they've got hundreds of people on VoiceFlow. Which is nuts. They have multiple different departments. The number of workspaces they have is crazy. There, dozens and dozens of like what I would call is like almost like master file agents, and then they have tons and tons of like sub agents and stuff. I think what you're going to see happen is in the same way that when mobile and websites first launched, they went to agencies, took all the like brunt of that workload because they're like, I don't know what this thing is. I just need you to build it for me. And then once it was proven as a core channel, they go, hold up, I need to hire people internally and build these teams out, right? Correct. Like really big banks, 15 years ago or, whenever the iPhone first launched, was it 2008 or 2007, something like that?
Sounds right.
There were no in-house mobile teams. Now, like in-house mobile technology teams is a real core thing, right? And they have VPs for it and directors and all that. I think you're going to see the same thing for what I feel like the industry hasn't figured out the right term yet. Chatbots, AI agents.
Yeah, right. It's going to get labeled something. The only one that I keep hearing is like the chief automation officer as the new C-suite exec and stuff like that. But we'll have to see. It'll be interesting.
There's going to be teams like that. And I view, going back to that whole concept of VoiceFlow is built for scale, we think a lot about how each of the different roles works in VoiceFlow. So we think, there's the conversation designer, very much in terms of thinking about the whole user experience, the whole architecture of the agent. You may then have a data scientist who's doing the NLU model, and they're working inside of that part of VoiceFlow. You may have a business analyst who's reviewing the transcripts daily. You may have a copywriter who's actually just working in the content management system, changing the copy for any deterministic responses. You've got a prompt engineer on the prompt side, optimizing your prompts. Like, how do you build the product in such a way where everyone kind of has their own home and they can do their own work without having to understand the rest of the tool? Like, that's kind of where we're trying to go. It's why in VoiceFlow functions, there's the function IDE. There's where like the developer can go ahead and build that integration. And then on the canvas, you see no code. You just pull in the function, because we're trying to segment those two roles. So it's like, developers, here's a home for you. Designers, here's a home for you, because that's going to allow for role scalability as well.
No, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, the agencies have kind of, struck first, and, obviously they love posting, their wins, in public as to, boost their own authority and stuff like that. But it'll be interesting to start watching the job boards as some of the stuff kind of pops up more specifically. And I would encourage anybody that is looking to kind of get in and start building out these skills. That's certainly a direction that you can go, and that's perfectly fine, right? You don't have to start an agency. Like, I know when I first got it started, oh yeah, I'm going to start this agency, and then I never hired anybody. I've just been doing it, kind of all myself as pretty much a glorified freelancer. So there are a lot of different ways to get involved with this for people that are looking, to get started. So don't think that you need to, scale to the moon and, make tons of money in order to be successful, because this is a particular skill set where it's obvious it's not going anywhere. And, we talked about the adoption curve and more, and hearing you talk about these companies and how they're integrating, multiple agents and more workspaces and stuff like that, it only solidifies the fact that this skill set is going to be important.
Yeah. And, for anyone listening who's an agency owner, I think a gap that I see in the market is agencies that are positioning themselves for mid-market and enterprise. I see it's mostly SMB, right?
Right.
And that we've even seen this as actually as a bit of a challenge at VoiceFlow. So when enterprises and mid-market companies ask us, hey, like, we don't want to do the work ourselves, who should we work with? We don't do it ourselves at VoiceFlow. That's kind of our stance. On our VoiceFlow experts page, there's like 2 enterprise certified partners. There's actually a bit of a gap. And what it mostly is, they're not AI native agencies. They're actually existing regional service integrators who are adding AI automation as a SKU, but they might not know it. Often they don't know it nearly as well as a lot of the SMB agencies that I talk to in our community. And so there's this
they're the ones that need to reach out to the builders and incorporate them into their own teams, right? And it makes sense that would pop up first, Braden, right? Because it's more difficult, right? There's more of a lift. There's, more case studies that you need, and you have to have multiple conversations. It's not like I can have an SMB discovery call, and in 15 to 20 minutes, you know exactly where you're getting and whether or not we're going to work together. That does not happen in mid-market and enterprise. You're talking months of lead time and all these conversations that need to be nurtured. So it's much more difficult, which is why that gap has, kind of presented itself in the market.
And what you saw happen in mobile was they would start working with an agency, the enterprise would, and then they would eventually just acquire the agency. They would say, actually, you know what? I'm already paying you $500,000 to build my mobile app. Why don't we'll just acquire the whole thing and bring you in-house, right? I think it's pretty likely that we see a similar curve where the AI automation agencies that are doing mostly SMBs today kind of creep their way up into doing mid-markets and eventually enterprise. Those contracts, just for everyone on the call's reference, like $500K is what they would get out of bed for, right? So these are very large contracts, and then suddenly it becomes a question of, hey, if you already have all the talent, you already know my tech stack, you already know how to work with us, we've enjoyed working with you, we'll just bring you in-house. And then I think you'll start to see that migration where there will still always be a services layer in the same way there's still a ton of services layers for mobile and web, but you'll see a lot of that also start to come in-house at the biggest companies. And I think that'll come through acquisition, because it's way easier to acquire a company than it is to train up new people, to be honest.
Absolutely.
You that's why companies do acquisitions all the time.
Makes sense. What was kind of a fun one that I thought of, and if we switch spots, or you sat in my seat and you were the agent builder, the chatbot builder, like because you've talked to so many agencies and companies, and obviously you know the product really well, so you can see the chess pieces and how they move and understand how they move. If you started building AI agents out, what would be kind of your strategy? What would be your chatbot empire, I guess?
It's funny. I actually launched a side project recently called Weekend AI, and my goal is to build customer support automation on top of Zendesk for mid-market startups. Go very, very niche, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because I think generally, and it's just a business strategy in general, like you want to start very niche to be able to kind of cut through all the noise, and then over time, you can like layer out concentrically and build a bigger
sure.
offering. So I would say choose a use case. Uh, the one I was thinking of is customer support automation. Choose a technology, and then know the pain points of that technology really well. Why is it Zendesk? Because Zendesk does not have a good automation suite on top, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. The value prop there is going to be like resolution rates and deflection rates and maybe an agent assist component as well. Cool. And then you start to basically go to the market and find companies that use Zendesk, and like that's your ICP, right?
Yep.
You probably want to go for companies that have over 100 employees because that's only the time when they have enough scale
Enough.
to actually need
Yep.
automation.
Yep.
100 to 1,000 employees using Zendesk, and maybe you go to their website and the customer experience is not great today. Boom, reach out to them. Very, very focused. That's how I'm like kind of scaling my own side project called Weekend AI, and that's a strategy for other people to use as well.
That's a great answer to the question. That's you're working on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you're pretty much be able to showcase, hey, look at this. This is what I would do, idiot. It's already up and online, and I'm already making money. So I'm
yeah.
already better at this than you, Connor. So
I
maybe.
no, I'm still working on landing the first few clients, but I want to empathize with our customers deeply, and I actually think from doing this myself, I'm like, the great thing is I already know the tooling, and I already have my preferred tooling, which is
There you go.
VoiceFlow, of course. Um, the biggest problem is getting clients, right? It's super hard,
It's the
and so
same
we're
problem that
launching
everybody has, right?
the
And we'll always
same.
have.
And it's funny because again, being in the seat I am, we get like hundreds and hundreds of companies sign up for VoiceFlow per day, and a lot of them are just looking for fish. They're not looking for a fishing rod.
Right.
And so we're trying to figure out how do we match the supply and demand, right? And so we're launching VoiceFlow experts. We're going to try to make it really easy to find a VoiceFlow expert, get certified as one, and like hopefully over time we start to like actually the value of VoiceFlow is not just the tool, but the ability to drive lead flow as well for
Sure.
the service folks. So yeah,
Absolutely.
if you anyone watching this, you can go to voiceflow.com, and then on our resources tab, you'll see hire an expert. I don't think we've pushed it yet. We're like really just making sure it's all dialed in. But you can sign up right now. You talk with our growth team, become a part of that, and then we're going to start to really push it in app and try to drive some lead flow.
Nice. Yeah, and I'll leave a link to that URL because I was on it yesterday. So
Great.
I know where it's at. So I'll put that in the description. Make sure that any builders that are looking at this want to sign up and start getting voice flow. I do. We're coming up on 50 minutes here. I do want to be respectful of your time. There is one particular thing that I had circled that I had to ask. So I have voiced, in previous videos, some of my displeasures, or let's just call it negative experience with some of the third-party SaaS applications that have kind of been built and attached to VoiceFlow, right? VoiceFlow
Yeah.
put up some API endpoints, which was great, and said, hey, build on top of us, right? Which kind of feeds back into or this platform or this ecosystem, and we're community centric first. So
Right.
more people building on top of our platform, it's potentially win-win. And
Yeah.
what happens, while that is great on the service, you're also potentially kind of shoveling VoiceFlow users into these platforms that they might have different goals than you do, right? Because they're only worried about revenue, and now okay, this was my side project, now it's my main project. What do now I need to add this feature, do this. And it's not the same venture backed company, right, that I'm talking to anymore. It's this
Yeah.
this group or this guy that kind of put together this stuff in a weekend. So I'm curious, Braden, from your point of view, how is this kind of experiment going, and do you like the direction that it's heading? Do you think that there's, maybe more of this that's going to come with, potential additional endpoints? I kind of just want to get your kind of idea on some of these other support tools in the market right now.
Yeah. So I think in general, uh, the reason that this approach was taken is because our product philosophy is to build the absolute best agent building tool. Like that's our main goal. Um, and anything that we're missing right now from like a whole suite, we can expose APIs. And what's actually interesting is a lot of customers, so for example, the analytics API was not because we thought that third-party analytics apps were going to get built. It was actually because a lot of our enterprise customers and like mid-market customers were like, hey, I have my own BI tool, my own business intelligence tool. I don't need to have another tool. I would rather like just take the data from VoiceFlow and pipe it into my own BI tool.
Yep.
We were like, okay, great. We'll just expose this API. Same thing as that the dialogue manager API was to actually deploy things. Open sourcing the React widget was to allow customers to customize the interface to their liking. But what's really cool is in the community, we started to see people pop up that they'd actually had been able to build apps using these APIs. And that was actually not the original intention, but it's been this amazing kind of like side thing that's happened. And now we really want to lean into it. I think what we can do over time is introduce what I would describe as more productization of the apps in terms of like ratings, in terms of actually having like better moderation for them as well. We can start to set some policies in place where, hey, maybe we do some financial backing, some rev shares with them, but they have to abide by a set of guidelines. Like there's a lot of things we can do. But I think because I know, oh, sorry, one second here. I'm going to quickly do not disturb. Because I know for 100% that VoiceFlow cannot do everything for everyone to every degree. And I think no tool can, or if they say they can, power to them. We're going to have to rely on like apps who can fill those like last 5%, 10% gaps. And this is not just a VoiceFlow thing. You see Figma do that, Shopify do that, Notion do that. Like a lot of the companies, we aspire to be in that category of sort of taking this approach. And so, I think we just need to do a better job at helping the community moderate what is out there. And that would be the approach we would take. But every app is going to be incentivized to control the user experience as much as they can, and I totally get it, right? Like if you can make the widget seem like it's your company, if you can you can make it seem like all the value is on your layer and not the app layer, like I totally get it, and honestly, like I kind of view it as a power to them. Like we're really happy that apps exist. I think it's like one of the most exciting parts of VoiceFlow, the fact that people love the platform enough to build stuff on top. And we're going to be super transparent about our roadmap. Like if we're ever going to launch like something that maybe competes with one of the apps, like we're going to try to let them know way in advance.
That was going to be one of my questions, right? Because you can imagine some of these apps that have popped up that the feature set is maybe just one or two things. Like I'm just handling the transcripts, or I'm just handling this, insert functionality here. And I would think that, VoiceFlow Core would see some sort of update to kind of, almost gobble up some of these repeated feature sets over time and potentially reduce some of the need for these third-party apps. And the other, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of it's the exact same thing as us in OpenAI though, right? Like if as long as they focus on continue to advance their feature set and be the most advanced version, that's great, because like the really simple stuff, VoiceFlow will continue to add the core stuff, right? So they need to focus on like what is their niche? Okay, it's agency owner, multiple workspace dashboards, like that might not be something we're going to get till like 2026 or 2025 or something. And so, that might be the feature set now, but by the time that VoiceFlow adds it, you should have 8 more features, right, that are driving even more value. So I think in the same way that VoiceFlow is going to continue to evolve on top of like foundation model companies, I think the VoiceFlow app should continue to evolve on top of VoiceFlow. And I think they have been for the most part. Like some of them started out looking very much like side project, and now some of them look very much like SaaS companies, which is like the coolest thing.
Sure. Especially as, you've got some dev focus, you have a platform and a framework that, favors devs. So you want people to kind of come in and indie hack their way, into usable features and stuff like that. I definitely get it. It'll be interesting to kind of
And
see it develop
and we
further.
also see internal enterprise apps too, right? So it's not just that it's the community and like the pro builds, like the pro user base that is using these apps. You also have these enterprise apps. Like I would love if we get to a point where, VoiceFlow's got some super big contract, and some of these SaaS apps on top of VoiceFlow have gotten, they've got their security locked down. Like we've verified their compliances are all in check, and we can now start cross-selling them to enterprise customers. Like I think that would be super cool. Like
That's interesting.
very similar to AWS has their own marketplace. Salesforce has their own app marketplace. Like it's actually a model that it makes a ton of sense because it allows us to satisfy our enterprise customers, and it allows the app to do a lot of the heavy lifting on a very particular thing where they actually become better experts on the problem than we are, right? Like to give a shout out to VoiceGlow, they probably know chat widget customization far better than we do at this point, right? Like they're really product experts in that area.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of awesome because it's tough for us to do everything to every degree and like we want to be the best. Like one of our values is like extreme. We have a bunch of values. Like our number one value is put customers first. But another one is make extreme quality the default. Like I hope customers see that in VoiceFlow. Like we really sweat the small details, even to loading animations and stuff. Like you're a professional, you're trying to use a pro tool. We really want to give you that experience.
That's one of my favorite things from a UX as a builder. I really enjoy the designer and the testing and things and how snappy it is. So I'm a big fan, and you can definitely see that from a quality perspective inside of the builder for sure. There's a lot of products that are kind of, it's the same React UI library that's just been wrapped, over like this is the same as 5 other products that I've seen, and you can tell that VoiceFlow is definitely not in that camp. So
yeah, we built our own Canvas engine from scratch. It took us about 1.5 years, but that's all custom rendering. It allows us to really optimize things. It allows for real-time collaboration. It's just an example of like, I think VoiceFlow's, we generally don't care about being first to a feature. But we want to do that feature the best. Like if we launch something, we want to we're trying to take almost more like an Apple approach in that sense of like, we might not be the first to do X, but when it comes out, you're going to be really amazed by X. And so
you also have to be careful, right? Because you have a lot of these clients that have these projects at huge scale, like even a small, percentage, let's call it, interruption or not working or hallucination, that's going to be felt by thousands and thousands of interactions if you're not careful. So it almost you've almost got an extra testing layer that some of the other platforms might not have to worry about because of some of the scale that you're operating at.
Yeah, it's actually funny. Like I feel like I now appreciate why enterprise companies move slower than everyone's always like, why does Google move so slow when they have like 1 billion engineers, right? It's because when you have no users, if you have a bug, but no one finds the bug, is it really a bug, right? We now have so many people using VoiceFlow that like anything we ship is going to be found instantly. And so we need to have our own layers of QA. And this is actually for anyone watching this who's been like a VoiceFlow user for like 1 year plus now. We had a whole transition period when we really started to see a lot of user growth from like kind of like SMBs, pros, and agencies and stuff about 1 year ago. Oh man, we had a real adjustment period. Like we had to triple the size of our support team because we weren't answering our own support tickets fast enough. We had to increase our community team in order to actually be able to handle the people in the community. We had to hire a QA team. Like a lot of this stuff like was kind of happening behind the scenes because suddenly we had a level of scale that we just hadn't seen before in terms of the number of users on VoiceFlow, because we've been around for 5 years. A lot of it was like enterprise and mid-market teams. There was less scale, right, in terms of the number of people versus like revenue and stuff. So, yeah, it's a fun added challenge. And one thing I will say is every line of code is a line of debt, and so it's like
absolutely
any developer knows that the bigger your code base gets, the more features you have, like the more time you have to put into testing things and like re-architecting things. And yeah, we have an advantage in being around for so long, but that's also a huge disadvantage. And we also have to be very thoughtful on when do we just kill things that aren't working. Like recently we sunset our Alexa integration.
Yeah.
And we did that because like we need to let go of some of the debt that it's not serving the broader customer base. And I think those are some of the decisions you have to make.
Makes sense. I've got we'll do two quick ones here and then I'll let you jump off
Yep.
here, Braden. I appreciate, you sitting here and doing this. I feel like we could probably extend this out to 3 hours, but we won't. But first thing, like as a builder, right? I'm building for a lot of cases, other clients or other teams or other businesses, and they don't necessarily have a VoiceFlow account or want a VoiceFlow account or want to host it. So I'm curious as to, your different, pro plan and teams and stuff like that. Do you anticipating making it maybe more about friendly for individual builders or maybe small agencies? Maybe you could talk a little bit about where your thoughts are there, because I know a lot of, there's a lot of functionality that people would like to do, whether it's just from a transcript perspective or I need an extra
Totally.
designer seat or something along those lines.
Yeah, so we changed our pro plan recently to include two
Yep.
seats. Or sorry, you still pay per seat, but you have it up to two
Option,
now.
sure.
Yeah, we made a big mistake in terms of how we did our pricing. Called this like 3 or 4 months ago. So what we had was like, and I'll walk everyone through the thinking here so you don't think we're crazy, but like it was like free plan. Okay, that's for the majority of the community. Great. That allows you to like kick in for, kick the can around, like get a feel for VoiceFlow, build some small projects. Like that'll be free forever. Okay, great. The pro plan is really like the core plan that is like, hey, um, you're an agency builder. You're trying to build some projects for clients. We want to uncap a lot of the models. By the way, the reason we can't put premium models on the free plan is actually not what people think. It's not we're just like money hungry or anything. We were at one point GPT-4 was on the free plan, and we had people signing up for VoiceFlow on the free accounts, and then just basically like using our API to access GPT-4 and the expensive
Wow,
models.
just use
We
it.
were
Yeah.
burning like a lot of money
Yep.
per day, so we put it onto the pro plan. So at least you have to actually put money down to
Right.
get that. That's why. Um, so the pro plans for like individuals, and then there's this gap between our enterprise plan, which is tens of thousands of dollars, it's often in the hundreds, and then you have the like this huge gap, right, where it's like $50 a month and then thousands of dollars a month, right? So we were like, what is the plan in the middle that is for like either a team at a company, not necessarily the whole company. It's like an enterprise team that might just be one team, or maybe like a larger agency. And so we created this teams plan, and the key feature there was more workspaces, because now you're dealing with multiple clients, multiple use cases, etc. But we priced it at $625 a month. And what we realized is that the pro plan and the team plan was too big of a jump if you just want to add one like developer, one friend to like help out. So now we've got it so that you can have the pro plan is 1 to 2 people, which should help a lot of the agencies. And the viewers are free on all the plans. If you want to invite people to come in, check out the canvas, be able to like collaborate in that sense, review transcripts, the viewers are completely free. And then now the team plan has been made 125 per seat, and it can scale up to 5 seats. And so
Nice.
there's now more overlap between pro and team, which is really helpful. And it's a bit more of a graceful scale up. And
Yeah.
like,
Easier to stomach than the 625 jump for sure. Yep.
yeah, and
Yep.
we're not in like revenue optimization mode at VoiceFlow. We spend more time trying to build features for customers than we are trying to capture value from the features we build. You and I were actually chatting about this last week, in that we weren't even enforcing our pricing for like years.
Yep.
We had the pricing plan on the webpage for like the project limit of 20, but we just never enforced it because we were like, it's too much, it's going to be like a day's worth of work, and we'd rather that engineer, instead of implementing like billing to limit customers, we'd rather us go build a new feature to add value for customers. And so we just didn't enforce it for like, I don't know, 5 years.
Yeah.
And so only recently did we start actually enforcing the billing. And the reason wasn't because we decided to, is because we switched to a billing system where it did it automatically, and it led to a whole kerfuffle with some customers. So yeah, for anyone listening, we're not in like billing revenue optimization mode. Maybe in 10 years, big public company and shareholders
Sure.
breathing down the neck or something. But right now it's like we're a small scrappy team just trying to build value for customers.
Sounds great, Braden. No, I appreciate you going over that. And I wanted to, carve a minute or two out here. If you had, an open floor, you wanted to talk about VoiceFlow's roadmap or anything coming up, that this is, your time to say whatever you want here before we jump off here.
No, I just want to say, I think, if anyone made it here, I really appreciate you kind of, listening all the way through. What makes like VoiceFlow special is we focus on three things. We focus on a design-led approach. We want you to have total control over the customer experience. We focus a lot on our UX to try to make that like the best in the world builder experience. So like if you're a professional, this is what you do for a living. We want you to have a tool that feels as professional as you are. We really focus on community as well. How do we enable apps on top of us, templates, experts? Like how do we not just accrue all the value ourselves, but really spread it around? And then lastly is flexibility. How do we make VoiceFlow the most flexible platform, right? Like I think we've been kind of leading the way in terms of exposing a lot of our APIs and allowing people to build stuff on top, build custom features and functions and web extensions and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, what do you think VoiceFlow? Try to build a pro tool for people who are doing their best work for customers and try to be that really flexible, the great community wrap it around. And yeah, I mean, we're super fortunate to have seen the success we've had, and like our customers are like the best. And you know, there is no one size fits all tool, but if we're right for you, we're going to try to do our absolute best to be the most right for you guys. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome, Braden. Appreciate the time, and Chatbot Builders, thanks for tuning in. And once again, Braden, I wouldn't be here with this channel building AI agents and chatbots for companies if it wasn't for stumbling into VoiceFlow last fall. So I appreciate all the effort that you and your team have built out this product, which I continue to use on a day-to-day basis, along with some others that we talk about. But yeah, happy building, everybody, and I'm sure we'll have another conversation like this soon.
Love it. Happy building. Thanks everyone. And thanks so much for the time, Connor.
Yeah.